Why don't you come right? Why don't you come right down here? I want to talk to you a minute. Where you been this morning? Come on, keep coming. Come right over toward me here until you're about right there. Stop.
Okay.
You're on TV right now, and so we're picking up everything you have to say to us.
Oh, you
Where you been, Bertie?
To say this morning, it's all been said.
All this noise in the background, I'm going to have you say that over again.
Oh, yeah. He says we haven't much to say. It's all been said.
Oh.
It's a beautiful morning, you know. It's
yeah,
one of those mornings that make you glad you're alive.
Yeah, it's nice to be up there, isn't it, this morning?
It's nice. Every morning when we wake up, we are glad that we can get up.
Well, I thought I'd better get the grandparents here. And 30th, 1981.
Last day of April.
Huh? Last day of April.
That's right.
Sister Armstrong, would you like to tell me you just go ahead and talk and tell me a little bit about your life history, where you were born, and anything you want.
I was born down in the big city of Levan, Utah, about many years ago. And then our next home was up in Heber City, that is on a farm just out of Heber City. And in 1913 we moved to Idaho Falls, so I really am one of the old pioneers from the area here since 1913. And I was one of 9 children in a family, and I've taught school, and I've taught in every organization in the church, and I taught.
What's the earliest thing you remember in your life? How old were you?
Oh, I think I was about 5 or 6 that I recall very much, because my folks had a dairy and a farm, and I was the official babysitter, and I used to sit there and rock these babies to sleep all the time. And so many times they said they came in and found the baby on the floor asleep, and I was asleep in the chair. That was my official job in the family. And my sisters swear that since I had to wash their faces and comb their hair every morning, that they almost have slant eyes. I'd do it up so tightly so I didn't have to do it twice a day. And so we had a pretty normal childhood, plenty to do. Our grandmother lived with us for 30 years, and what Mother couldn't find for us to do, she did. We had to work constantly. We're never permitted to sit down and just be idle.
What was your maiden name, or your mother and father's name?
My father was Charles Jensen, and my mother's name was Letty Christensen Jensen.
Okay, Brother Armstrong, why don't you tell them a little bit about your early life then?
Well, I was born down in southern Utah also, and at the age of 5, that's been about 80 years ago, we moved to Idaho, where my father thought the opportunities were better, and we moved to Rexburg, Idaho first. And there we lived for a number of years. Then I'm just going to mention briefly the towns we lived in. We moved from there to Parker, Idaho, which is just 10 miles north of Rexburg. My father was a blacksmith, and he ran blacksmith shops in practically all the towns that we lived in. So, and then we moved from Parker down to Lorenzo, Idaho, from Lorenzo to Rigby, and from Rigby we moved to Burley for 1 year, and then from there up to Ryrie. From there we had a dry farm up on what they call Little Birch Creek, and then we bought a farm, an irrigated farm down near Ryrie. I went to school down in Cedar City, Utah. Got all the schooling I got was that's where I got my high schooling, and at the BAC at that time. And then yet 1917, the year I was to graduate, the war broke out with Germany, and I was dismissed early, as were all of the farmer boys, to go home and get on the farm and produce food, because food was the important item at that time for winning the war. I was later drafted into the Army and went to Fort Lewis to train. From there, we went overseas to France and Belgium, and we were in 3 or 4 of the heaviest engagements that the American troops entered into, but we got out unscathed, so to speak, and came home, and then I came back to Rowley where the folks were, and then I finally married. I married a girl from Rowley, a Noreen Streeper, and we moved to Idaho Falls and then to Salt Lake, and then back to Idaho Falls again. And there she passed away at the young age of 25 and left me 2 little girls, Beth and Gay. And then I was single for a number of years and was fortunate enough to meet Myrtie Jensen. He lived on First Street, where their father had built him a nice home, and it's still there. Francis Stoddard lives in it at the present time. And then, after a while, we were married. I lived over on 154 3rd Street, and I was in the music business for about 10 years with Aubrey Andlin. We had the Andlin Music Company, and then that's when the Depression hit. The times got so tough that we had to give up the music business because people could get along without music at that time. And then after a while, we got an offer to go to Salt Lake to sell life insurance, and that was quite a venture, because the people down there were in the Depression also. They couldn't. The only thing they were interested in life insurance was to see how much they could borrow on the present policy. And my brother-in-law, Cliff Kindred, and I and our families moved down there. He went to Provo and I went to Salt Lake. Well, after a while, this job terminated. We came back here and went into the First Street Grocery. My father-in-law, Charles Jensen, owned the building. Tom Sutton had been in it for a long time, but he had gone broke. And we came back here and went into the grocery business with Cliff Kindred and Owen Jensen, Myrtie's brother. And then after they had opened it up for a while, Dad Jensen figured that he was too old to handle his part of it, and he sold his part to me. And Myrtie and I and the little family, we had another little girl by that time, Aline, and we moved back to Idaho Falls. And there we worked in that and ran that grocery store for about 30 years, I think, wasn't it? 30 years. And moved from that and bought a place on 3rd Street where we lived for 30 years, I was getting. And then I decided that I'd like to get out of the grocery business, and so we sold out, and I went into the real estate business.
Who did you sell out to?
Beg pardon?
Who did you sell the grocery store out to?
Well, we sold first to my son-in-law, Walter Yelsey.
We sold to Ames first.
Was it Ames?
Yeah.
Oh, Ames the Ames from Star Valley we sold to first. And then they couldn't make a go of it, so they sold to Walt. And then he decided he couldn't make a go of it. Times were tough. And then it was changed hands several times. And finally I came back to me and we sold the building. So that brings it up to about the time that we became acquainted with all these fine people in Idaho. We came to Idaho Falls in 1923, and Idaho Falls was a town of about 8,000 people. And I did quite a lot in music work. I used to sing the leads in operettas they put on here at the Paramount Theater, and it took quite a lot to keep us before the public, it seemed like.
And we ought to get you to sing one here today.
Yeah. then I used to lead quite a number of choirs, both in Salt Lake. I led choirs in Salt Lake, and led many choirs in Idaho Falls, and also I had many church jobs. I was in the second bishopric of the second ward when we had 2 wards in Idaho Falls. That was, but I was a second counselor to Bishop Anglin. Then I was, after the ward was organized again, I was taken into the stake MIA presidency with Dr. J.W. West and Adrian A. Merrill. Maybe you've heard of them.
J.W. West delivered my next youngest brother, the youngest one, I think.
Well, but he was a wonderful man, and we had the MIA in this stake for many years. And it might be interesting to note just what this stake consisted of at that time. It consisted of 2 wards in Idaho Falls. It consisted of Ammon, Lincoln, Iona, Yukon, Milo, Shelton, and Beaver Creek, Du Bois really. And at one time there was a little ward up at Vaughan, and it also included that. But that was the area of the Idaho Falls stake, and we had to visit all those outlying wards and keep the mutuals organized and things going. Then after we got out of the mutual, I was put on the High Council in the 5th ward that was taken off the 2nd ward, and was there for quite a number of years, and then made bishop of the 5th ward, where I was only a bishop a short time, I think only a year or so, and then asked to go into the stake presidency with W.J. O'Brien, and I was the first counselor, and Elmer Crowley, the educator here, was the second counselor. And later on he moved to Washington, D.C.
He's some short-tail relative of my wife.
And Paul Alstrom became the second counselor. And we were a stake presidency for 6 years.
That was during that time that you called me in to be a assistant state clerk.
Is that so?
Mm-hmm.
And also as the counselor first to Bishop Orson Davis.
Yeah. Orson Davis was the last bishop that we had the privilege of appointing. He just passed away recently. But anyway, I've just about been through the whole gamut of church jobs. I was president of the 5th Ward MIA, as president, and president of, I've had many auxiliary jobs, high priest, quorum instructor for many years, and that sort of thing. And at the present time, I've just about worn down my skein of yarn. The only thing I have, I'm a home teacher now. And so,
Myrtie, why don't you tell me where you met this guy that we've been listening to here?
Where I met him?
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about your courtship.
Such a long time ago. I can hardly remember that far back. Well, I was teaching school down at BYU, and I came home in the summertime, and I believe the first time I ever noticed him at all, we were taking the gleaners and M-men out by the lavas for
those caves.
someplace out
The
there.
caves out west of town here.
And we were going to cook our, in the Dutch ovens and so forth and so on. And I had a load of people to haul out there, and he took another one. And he was the one who insisted upon following us home, so if I had any car trouble. And I thought, well, that's quite decent for somebody to even pay attention to follow me home. And he followed me quite frequently after that. So,
Yeah, he sure did.
but I went back to BYU and taught another year, and then decided to leave the BYU and come up here and teach school
I persuaded you to get a job up here at the high
so
school.
that we could play around for a year before we were married. And so I came up here and taught in the high school for a year before we were married. Then in due time we had this new baby, and I didn't go back to teaching then. I worked in the store for 15 years during the war because we couldn't hire anyone.
Which baby was this now?
Aline. And she's married to Dwayne Gardner. She sings in the Tabernacle
They live in
Choir.
our ward here just down the street from us when we first moved to town.
She sings in the Tabernacle Choir now, and they'll be going to South America in May.
You see her on TV once in a while. Don't
Yes,
you?
we see her on TV, and then Joe has told you when we had a real financial struggle for a long time there, just the way other people had during that depression. And I don't know how we had the nerve to get married then during that depression, because I had a pretty good job before that. And but anyway, everything has worked out just fine, and we had enough business that we could educate our family, educate our children by two of us working all the time. And then I decided that I just couldn't take that business anymore, and I wanted to go back to school, to teaching. So Miss Rotman broke her leg. I guess that was fortunate for me. And Elmer Crowley got me to come over and finish the year at the high school. Then I couldn't leave Joe that long though, so I stayed in the store another year until we were able to sell it. And then I had to go over to the junior high school for 1 year because there wasn't an opening at the high school. But life's too short to teach in junior high school. And and so I taught there, and then came back to the high school and taught for 14 years in the high school.
What did you teach?
English. I taught English, juniors and seniors in English, and how to write, particularly something that most people won't teach because it's too much work. And Joe says I spent 90 hours a week, and I think I had it down to about 80 hours a week time I got my papers read and everything.
That sounds like humor.
And so if you go into teaching, I just don't do the composition part of it, do something that you can check right or wrong or true or false. But that isn't what our students need today. They need to learn how to spell, they need to learn how to express themselves. So I also had a great many. Joe forgot to tell you that he was commander of the American Legion, president of the Kiwanis Club, a member of the, what do you call it, in the Scouts?
On the executive board.
In the executive board for 30 years, and a member of the 100 Club, all for many, many years now. And so he's had a great deal of public, and president of the school board. Oh, if we told you all the things that we've done, it'd fill volumes.
Tell us a little bit about those first few years of the life of those little girls, Beth and Gay?
Oh, well, they were always sweet little gals.
How old were they when?
And Gay was 3.5, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I believe she was 3.5 when we were married, and she was living with her grandmother, with Noreen's mother up in Ryrie, except for an occasional visit down here. And so we used to bring her down to live with us for a limited time, and then her grandma had to have her again. But those times lengthened, and but they've always been delightful girls, just beautiful children.
How old was Beth?
Beth was,
She was 7.
no, was she that old?
Yeah, she was. She was 7 when we were married. So, but they've always been just as dear to me as my own. I never treated them anything other than the same as my own, or maybe a little bit better. I had to keep on the good side of their father.
They certainly acted like it, and they've always felt like it. Their grandmother, Streeper, fell in love with Myrtie just the same as I did. And so it's worked out so beautifully. She's always very, very, very much in love with Myrtie.
She stayed with us sometimes too, not too long at a time, but she was a good woman, and so. And you asked how we got along. Gay came home from school the first year that she was in 1st grade, and she came home. She said, "Mother, you're not a bit like those." Those stepmothers that we hear about in all these stories.
Like Cinderella.
Yeah, like Cinderella and those. She says, "You're not a bit like that." So she doesn't know any other mother at all, and I don't think Beth remembers her mother very much either. So they've been delightful girls to raise, and we've given them every advantage that we possibly could.
I mentioned when Joe was born and Charles.
Yes, we also have 2 sons, Joe, who is a doctor in Provo, and our son Charles, who lives in Dallas, Texas. He has his master's degree from the University of BYU and is an economist with the Army Corps of Engineers. So that he's one of their troubleshooters, and they have a tornado or a flood or something, then he's sent there to estimate the cost of repair and so forth and so on. Very responsible job, and we're very proud of our 5 kids. So I don't know I sing their praises all the time, and I don't know if anyone who has any better right to do it.
I've got to take a pill.